in here, man, it's unbelievable. They use a lot of old school noise reduction techniques. So for example, loads of sound deadening material inside this new platform, double glazed windows, and I've already spoken about that low drag coefficient, but there's also a lot of new school techniques that they've applied in order to keep things as quiet as possible. For example, the Burmester audio system inside this car works a bit like a giant pair of noise cancelling headphones. It basically detects the unwanted low frequency sounds around you, the rumbling that you get in a normal internal combustion engine car, and then plays opposite frequencies in order to cancel those out. So the end result is almost like the world has been put on mute. It's mad. If you're not a fan of complete silence, then you're in luck, because Mercedes have put in a couple of sound profiles that allow the EQS to make a little bit of noise while you drive. And to access that, all you need to do is dive into the menu system and click on the sound experience adjustment. When you do that, you can choose between two sound modes in this model. So there's silver waves. If I press that and accelerate, you hear that? And if I brake, it makes a braking noise as well. Acceleration and braking, very cool. And then there's vivid flux. Ooh, that's a tinnier, more high-pitched noise. So you can actually have a little bit of encouragement from a fake engine sound, really, but it does sound a lot more like a spaceship than an internal combustion engine. Very cool. Plus, if you don't like any of that, you can switch it off completely. One thing that I don't think is quite as good as the S-Class are the seats, which in this case don't have those incredible side bolsters that keep you in place as you go around corners. And overall, I don't think they're quite as comfortable as the seats in the S-Class, but I'm nitpicking now because they're pretty good. I mean, look at these pillows. Gotta love that. You might have noticed the EQS has paddles behind the steering wheel. Those aren't for changing gears, those are actually for changing the level of energy recuperation from the brakes. So you can cycle between no recuperation, which means that the car will just coast along without scrubbing off any speed, or normal recuperation or increased recuperation, which slows it down quite aggressively to the point where you barely need the brake pedal. As for the suspension, well, it's at least as good as the S-Class, probably better. I've driven these two cars back to back now, and the impression I get is that this rides a little better than the S-Class. It's wonderful. It can actually scan the road ahead and learn where potholes are, so that the next time you visit that location, it'll slacken off the air suspension so the car rides more smoothly over the roads. It works like an absolute treat. This is, it's so good.
At the moment in the UK, we're only getting one version of the EQS, the 450 Plus, which has a single 329 horsepower motor driving the rear wheels. This gives 568 Newton meters of torque, which is enough for 0 to 62 in 6.2 seconds. That's not very powerful on paper, but in practice it feels every bit as quick as the S500. In some countries outside of the UK, Mercedes will also offer the EQS 580, which has 516 horsepower and is good for 0 to 62 in 4.3 seconds. Fingers crossed we also get that version at a later date.
Let's talk range now. The EQS 450 Plus has a massive battery pack. It's 108 kilowatt hours, and that provides a total driving range of up to 484 miles WLTP. That's basically London to Scotland. The only downside is that it's a big old battery pack, so the car weighs a very hefty 2.5 tons. Effectively, it's as heavy as an SUV. But don't get it twisted. If you like to drive enthusiastically, the car can acquit itself quite well. Let me use this pad down here on the center console, knock it into sport mode. Acceleration is good, noise is good. Chuck it into a corner. Look at that. It's actually dealing with the bends really, really well. Because all the batteries are located really low down in the floor, it has a really low center of gravity. And that means that when you get into a bend, there's not as much body roll as you might expect. The body control is really good and the grip is very strong. And then you got huge amounts of torque as you exit a corner. And then that noise, listen. You can actually have fun in an EQS. Plus, Mercedes are going to make an AMG version as well. There will be an AMG EQS. And that should be an absolute riot. Okay, there's one more thing I want to show you on this car, which is related to the steering system. It comes with rear wheel steering. In other words, the rear wheels will turn either 4.5 degrees or 10 degrees in the opposite direction to the fronts to make your turning circle even smaller. So let's try that out. Now, you should be seeing pictures of my rear wheels doing something that looks very, very awkward. But the benefit of that is that you can turn around in exceptionally small spaces. How cool is that? One more thing to show you as well. I'll actually engage this 360-degree camera so you can actually position the camera where you want to help you park. And it feels a bit like you're driving in a video game. You can look all around the car as you drive, that's just so cool, isn't it? It's like playing GTA or something.
So it's good for drivers, but how about rear passengers? Well, it's not too bad. Leg and headroom feel pretty similar to the S-Class, and the rear seats are plenty comfortable, although there's no sign of the leg rest you get in the S-Class. But you do get a fold-down center console that doubles as an armrest and a storage area with a fairly useful wireless charging pad. It's good, but not all good. So with that in mind, here are a few highlights and lowlights in the EQS, starting with the good stuff.
Charging. This car will charge at a rate of 200 kilowatts. Not the highest that we've seen, but Mercedes reckon it can sustain peak charging for longer, which means you can add 300 kilometers of range into the EQS in only 15 minutes. This car has a really clever sat-nav that can tell you where your local charging stations are, but not only that, it will actually show you how powerful the chargers are, whether they're free, and also how much they cost you to charge. Very clever. The EQS has a built-in HEPA filter. That's one of the reasons this bonnet doesn't open. You can actually clean the interior of viruses and bacteria before you get into the car. Plus, it will even recommend that you close the windows and the sunroof whenever you're driving through an area with a bad environment, like Slough. These doors are very clever. They have sensors all around, so when they open automatically, they won't slam into an object. Like James, my stuntman, stand there, please. And I'll open the door, and in theory, he won't get hit. Look at that. There's even another clever function. James, jump in, please. What happens when you close the door and you have a limb dangling between the door and the frame of the car? Let's find out if he loses a leg. You ready? Will it stop? Will it stop? Will it stop? Boom! Yes! Right, off you go. The EQS can drive itself and park itself. It can put itself into a parking space and remove itself from that parking space without the driver being inside. Unfortunately, that feature isn't available in the UK. Now, onto some of my not so favorite features. The rear seating position in the EQS isn't amazing. You have batteries in the floor, which means that your legs are pushed higher than they would be in the S-Class, which means that you end up feeling like you've got your legs up around your chest. Not ideal. That fancy rear wheel steering system that I spoke about earlier, well, it's an optional extra, I'm afraid. As standard, it will let you turn 4.5 degrees in the opposite direction, but to turn the full 10 degrees, you need to spend extra money for an over-the-air software update. So this will cost you. The build quality is not as good as it could be. I know this is a prototype, so I'm willing to forgive it, but I found some little issues. For example, look at this. You can see these controls rattling around. Oh, six-figure car. Not so sure that's so good in this. Mercedes' first attempts at building an electric car were pretty hit and miss. The EQA and the EQC weren't exactly slam dunks. This thing though, I think is an absolute home run, and it really shows what Mercedes can do when they put their minds to it. Honestly, this is the benchmark now. S-Class, we love you, but rest in peace.